The sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of molten gold and soft amber, its fading light shimmering across the restless waves that lapped lazily against the shore. The air carried the sharp tang of salt mingled with the faint sweetness of sunscreen, a fragrance woven into the fabric of that warm Virginia summer evening. In the distance, the joyful clamor of tourists, laughter and carefree chatter, drifted like a fleeting melody as the day surrendered to dusk. Jack Carter, a man weathered by both the sea and the struggles of a simple life, wiped the sweat from his brow with a calloused hand. His muscles ached, weary from a long day of hauling kayaks and paddleboards for the rental shop near the dock. He stacked the last paddle into the weathered wooden shed, its splintered edges a testament to years of service, and let out a quiet sigh. The thought of a cold drink and the soothing sound of the tide called to him, a small reward after hours of toil. But then a scream shattered the tranquil air, piercing through the hum of the evening like a jagged blade. "Someone's drowning! Call for help!" Jack's head snapped up, his tired eyes scanning the shoreline where a small crowd had gathered, their faces etched with panic as they pointed toward the churning ocean. His gaze followed their outstretched hands, and his stomach twisted into a tight knot. There, amid the relentless waves, a girl fought for her life. Her arms thrashed against the water, dark hair plastered to her face, her body a fragile silhouette against the pull of the tide dragging her farther from safety. Jack didn't pause to think. His heart thundered in his chest as he bolted forward, feet pounding the wet sand, tearing off his shirt in one swift motion before diving into the icy embrace of the sea. The water stung, colder than he'd expected, but he pushed the sensation aside. Years of swimming, these treacherous waters had forged his body into a weapon against the current's cruel grip. Stroke by stroke, he closed the distance, his eyes locked on her. She went under, disappearing beneath a swell, and Jack's heart lurched painfully. "Hold on!" he shouted, his voice a desperate plea swallowed by the roar of the waves. She resurfaced, coughing, gasping, her eyes wide with terror as the ocean clawed at her. "Take my hand!" he yelled, reaching out, but she was too dazed, too lost in her fear to grasp him. Another wave crashed over them, dragging her down again. With a surge of determination, Jack lunged, his arms snaking around her waist. She flailed, her instincts driving her to fight, making it harder for him to keep them afloat. "Stop fighting me," he commanded, his voice steady despite the chaos. "I've got you." Her body stiffened, then went limp. Whether from exhaustion or a fragile thread of trust, he couldn't tell. Jack kicked with everything he had, battling the tide's relentless push, his arms burning as he cradled her against him. The shore loomed closer, the voices of the crowd growing louder, a lifeline of sound pulling him forward. After what felt like a lifetime, his feet scraped the ocean floor. He stumbled into the shallows, his grip tightening as her weight sagged against him, her strength fading. They collapsed onto the sand, her body trembling, lips tinged a ghostly blue. "She's not breathing!" someone cried, and Jack's pulse roared in his ears. He dropped to his knees beside her, his training taking over, as he tilted her head back and pressed his hands to her chest. "Come on," he whispered, his voice raw with desperation, as he began compressions. "Breathe." 1 second stretched into another, then another. Nothing. Fear clawed at him, but he pinched her nose, sealed his lips over hers, and breathed life into her lungs. 1 breath. 2. Then a violent cough erupted from her, water spilling from her mouth as her body jolted back to life. A wave of relief crashed over Jack, heavy and sweet, as her eyes fluttered open. The crowd gasped, but he barely heard them. For a moment she lay there, dazed, her chest heaving with shaky breaths. Then her gaze found his, dark, searching, filled with something unspoken, and Jack felt the world shift beneath him. He'd saved people before, careless tourists, kids swept too far by the current. But this was different. Her eyes held gratitude, yes, but also a flicker of something deeper, something that reached into his soul and refused to let go.
"You're okay," he said, his voice softening, a gentle tether to pull her back from the edge. "Just breathe." She did, her breaths ragged but steadying. Jack sat back, running a hand through his dripping hair, the adrenaline still thrumming through his veins. Around them, the crowd murmured, some clapping, others staring in awe. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone had called for help. The girl blinked, her focus sharpening. "You saved me," she rasped, her voice barely a whisper. Jack managed a breathless chuckle. "Yeah, well, you didn't make it easy." A faint smile tugged at her lips, fragile but real, before paramedics pushed through the crowd. Jack stepped back, letting them take over, his body screaming with exhaustion. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, she turned her head, her eyes locking with his once more, unreadable yet piercing. He didn't know it then, but that moment, that single, fleeting connection, would unravel his life and stitch it back together in ways he could never have imagined. The fluorescent lights of the coastal clinic buzzed faintly overhead, casting a stark, sterile glow across the white walls. The steady beep of a heart monitor filled the small room, a quiet rhythm underscored by the distant crash of waves outside. Jack sat in a hard plastic chair beside the hospital bed, his arms crossed, damp clothes clinging to his skin like a second layer of exhaustion. He'd been there for hours waiting, though he couldn't quite say why. He could have left after the paramedics took her, could have gone home to collapse into his own bed. But something, an inexplicable pull, kept him rooted there. The girl stirred, a soft groan escaping her lips as her fingers twitched against the crisp sheets. Slowly, her dark lashes lifted, revealing deep brown eyes that blinked against the harsh light. Jack leaned forward, his voice gentle. "Hey, take it easy." She turned her head toward him, her gaze unfocused at first, then sharpening with recognition. "You," she whispered, her voice hoarse from the salt water she'd swallowed. Jack chuckled softly. "Yeah, me." Her brows knitted together as she took in the IV in her arm, the sterile room. "Where am I?" she asked, her words trembling. "The local clinic," Jack replied. "You almost drowned, but you're okay now." She exhaled, closing her eyes for a moment as the memory flooded back. "Right. The ocean. I remember." Her voice faltered, then steadied as she looked at him again. "You saved me." Jack shrugged, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Guess you do and guess I was in the right place at the right time." She studied him, her eyes tracing the lines of his face, the damp strands of hair clinging to his forehead. Then with a wince, she pushed herself up slightly, her body protesting the effort. "What's your name?" she asked, her voice soft but curious. "Jack Carter," he said simply. "I'm Olivia Parker." He nodded, the name meaning little to him beyond its quiet elegance. "Nice to meet you, Olivia Parker. Under slightly less dramatic circumstances, I hope." A breathless laugh escaped her, fragile but warm. "Yeah, I guess I owe you one, huh?" Jack shook his head, his expression earnest. "You don't owe me anything. Just glad you're okay." But Olivia wasn't convinced. Her gaze dropped to her hands, nails perfectly manicured despite the ordeal, then lifted to him again, taking in his sand-streaked clothes, the roughness of his hands, the quiet strength in his frame. "You work here, at the beach?" she asked. Jack nodded. "Yeah, I help out at the boat rental shop, do some odd jobs around town." Something flickered in her eyes, curiosity, perhaps, or disbelief. "So you live here? In this town?" Jack smirked faintly. "All my life." The contrast between them was stark. Even lying in a hospital bed, she radiated an effortless refinement, a grace that spoke of a world far beyond his own. And she was from that world. She hesitated, then spoke again. I'm from Los Angeles. Jack raised an eyebrow. Yeah? What brings you all the way to Virginia? She sighed, a hint of weariness in her voice. Family vacation. My dad insisted on taking a break from the city, or whatever that means. We have a house near the beach for the summer. Jack nodded, though the phrase, "we have a house for the summer," felt like a foreign language to him, a glimpse into a life of ease he'd never known. She licked her lips, then added, "My dad, he's Parker, William Parker, Parker Enterprises." The name clicked now, even for Jack, who paid little mind to the world of wealth and power. Parker Enterprises, a real estate empire worth billions, its towering developments a symbol of opulence. So she was that Olivia Parker. He stayed silent, but something in his stillness made her shift uncomfortably. "I just thought you should know," she muttered, "since you saved my life and all." Jack leaned back, crossing his arms. "Doesn't change anything." She blinked, surprised. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, his tone steady. "I mean, whether you're rich or not, you were still drowning." Her lips parted, caught off guard. "That's not usually how people react when they find out who I am." Jack smirked. "Let me guess. Most people either treat you like royalty or try to use you for something?" Olivia sighed, sinking back against the pillow. "You have no idea." Jack exhaled, rubbing the back of his neck. "Well, sorry to disappoint, but I don't need anything from you. Saving you wasn't some kind of business deal." She studied him, her dark eyes searching his face as if trying to unravel him. Then, to his surprise, she smiled. A real unguarded smile that lit something warm in his chest. "That's refreshing," she admitted. Jack chuckled. "Glad I could be of service." A quiet moment passed between them, a thread of understanding weaving itself into the space. Olivia cleared her throat, shifting slightly. "Look, I know you said I don't owe you anything, but—" She hesitated, then pressed on. "I'd really like to repay you somehow." Jack shook his head. "Like I said, you don't have to." "But I want to," she insisted, her voice firm. "Money, a favor, anything. Just name it." He met her gaze, unwavering. "I didn't save you for a reward, Olivia." She swallowed, hard, his words striking a chord she hadn't expected. In her world, everyone wanted something, money, favor, power. But Jack didn't. For the first time in as long as she could remember, Olivia Parker didn't feel like a millionaire's daughter. She felt like a girl who'd been pulled from the jaws of death by a boy from a world so unlike her own. A boy whose steady presence made her feel more alive than she'd ever been. The sun blazed high in the sky, casting a golden shimmer across the waves as they danced gently against the weathered wooden docks. The air was thick with the scent of salt and the crisp bite of a fresh sea breeze, punctuated by the occasional cry of a gull soaring overhead. Jack stood barefoot on the edge of a small fishing boat, his hands moving with practiced grace as he tied a knot in the rope, securing it to the dock. The sun warmed his skin, his muscles flexing beneath its rays, a quiet strength in every motion. "Okay, sailor," Olivia's voice called from behind him, bright and teasing. "What's next?" Jack turned, squinting against the sunlight. She stood there, framed by the horizon, in denim shorts and a simple white tank top, a vision so out of place in his rugged world, yet so perfectly at home. Her dark hair caught the breeze, and her eyes sparkled with a lightness he hadn't seen in the hospital. He smirked. "You sure you're up for this?" She crossed her arms, arching a brow. "I survived almost drowning. I think I can handle a boat ride." Jack chuckled, shaking his head. "All right, princess, let's see what you got." She rolled her eyes at the nickname but stepped forward eagerly as he offered his hand, steadying her as she climbed aboard. With a gentle push, they glided out onto the water, the boat cutting through the waves with a quiet grace. For the first few minutes, silence settled between them, comfortable and vast. Olivia's gaze swept over the coastline, wild, untouched, stretching endlessly in both directions. It was nothing like the manicured private beaches of California she'd grown up with, and that rawness stirred something in her chest. "This is incredible," she murmured, her voice soft with awe. Jack glanced at her, adjusting the sail with a practiced hand. "You've never been on a boat before?" "Not like this," she admitted, hugging her knees to her chest, her tone turning tender. "Everything in my world is controlled, structured. This is—" She trailed off, searching for the word. "Free," Jack offered. She turned to him, her brown eyes catching the sunlight, reflecting it back like polished amber. "Yeah, free." They spent the afternoon on the water, Jack teaching her the ropes, how to cast a fishing line, how to steer the boat, how to feel the wind subtle shifts. Olivia threw herself into it, laughing when she fumbled, her voice ringing out in triumph when she finally got it right. Despite her initial grumbles about the fishy smell and the slimy bait, she glowed with a joy so pure it caught Jack off guard. At one point, they anchored near a quiet inlet, the water calm and inviting, a mirror of the sky above. Jack stood at the boat's edge, hands on his hips. "All right, lesson 2, swimming." Olivia scoffed, a playful edge to her voice. "I think I've had enough of the ocean trying to kill me for one trip." Jack smirked. "It's different when you're in control. Come on." She hesitated, biting her lip, then, before doubt, could anchor her, peeled off her tank top, revealing the bikini beneath, and dove in. The water was cool against her sun-warmed skin, a refreshing jolt that made her gasp. When she surfaced, Jack was beside her, pushing his wet hair back with a grin. "Told you," he said. "Not so bad." She smiled, floating on her back, the sky stretching endlessly above. "You were right." For a while they drifted together, the gentle rocking of the waves cradling them. It was the first time Olivia had felt truly weightless, not just in the water but in her soul. No expectations, no gilded cage of wealth and duty. Just this moment, pure and unscripted. Jack watched her, captivated by the way the sunlight danced across her skin, the way her laughter flowed freely now, unshackled from the guarded girl he'd pulled from the sea. She was unlike anyone he'd ever known, someone from a world of glass towers and private jets. Yet here she was, fitting seamlessly into his quiet, salt-strewn life. And that terrified him. Because the more time they spent together, the more he felt a longing bloom within him, a yearning for something he knew he could never hold. That night, after docking the boat, they walked along the beach, their feet sinking into the cool, yielding sand. Olivia wrapped her arms around herself. As a breeze swept in, her voice soft. "I get why you love it here." Jack glanced at her, his throat tightening. "Yeah?" She nodded. "It's simple, real. No pretense, no expectations. Just life." He swallowed hard, her words echoing his own unspoken thoughts. "And what about your life? Back in California?" She exhaled, a shadow crossing her face. "It doesn't feel like mine. Not really." They stopped walking, the silence between them swelling with something heavy, something alive. Olivia turned to him, and for the first time he saw vulnerability in her eyes, a raw, unguarded ache that made his chest constrict. "You ever feel like you're living a life that was chosen for you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Jack hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah." They stood there, the waves whispering against the shore, the moon bathing them in its silver glow. He knew he should pull back, keep the distance between their worlds intact. She wasn't staying. She couldn't. But then Olivia reached for his hand, her fingers threading through his, warm and steady, and in that touch Jack felt the walls he'd built crumble. He was in trouble now, deep, undeniable trouble, because he didn't want to let her go. The morning air was crisp, laced with the familiar sting of salt and the faint echo of sunscreen from the early risers dotting the beach. The sun climbed slowly over the horizon, casting long, jagged shadows across the wooden dock where Jack stood, adjusting the ropes on one of the boats. Sleep had eluded him the night before, his mind tangled in memories of Olivia, the way her hand had fit so perfectly in his as they walked the shore, the way her eyes had sought his beneath the moonlight, as if she'd found something precious. In him, Jack had spent his life believing people like her, born to wealth, to privilege, didn't linger in places like this. And yet, Olivia had stayed, her presence lingering in his thoughts like a tide that wouldn't recede. Maybe, just maybe, she'd felt it too. The spark, the pull, the quiet promise of something more. The sound of hurried footsteps snapped him from his reverie. "Jack!" He turned, and there she was, Olivia, barefoot on the dock, her hair wild from the wind, her eyes alight with something urgent, something he couldn't name. Before he could speak, she blurted, "I have to go." His stomach twisted, a cold weight settling there, but he forced his face to stay neutral. "When?" "Now," she said, her voice tight. Jack exhaled, nodding once, his fingers tightening around the rope until his knuckles whitened. "Well," he said after a beat, summoning a small, detached smile. "It was nice knowing you. Have a safe trip." Olivia's brow furrowed, confusion flickering in her eyes. "That's it." Jack shrugged, his tone deliberately light. "What else should I say?" She stared at him, searching his face for a crack in the armor, a glimpse of the truth he buried deep. But Jack wouldn't let her see it, wouldn't let her see how her leaving carved a hollow in his chest, how it hurt more than he'd ever admit. Her hands clenched at her sides, and for a moment she hesitated, words trembling on her lips. "Tell me to stay," a small voice pleaded inside her, but Jack only nodded toward the path back to town. "Your car's waiting," he said quietly. She swallowed hard, the weight of his words pressing down on her. Right. They stood there, locked in a silent standoff, neither moving, neither yielding. Then, finally, Olivia turned and walked away. Jack watched her go, each step a quiet wound, a bruise blooming beneath his ribs. When she vanished from sight, he let out a slow, shuddering breath, staring at the empty horizon. This was how it was meant to end, he told himself. A fleeting summer collision, nothing more. But Olivia wasn't so sure. As the car pulled away from the dock, carrying her back to the life she'd always known, a gnawing ache settled in her bones. She was leaving something behind, something real, something vital. And the farther she went, the more she felt its absence, a quiet cry she wasn't ready to silence. The days after Olivia's departure stretched into an eerie stillness. Jack returned to his routine, early mornings at the docks, long hours beneath the unrelenting sun, hauling kayaks and mending boats. But the rhythm felt off, hollowed out, like a song missing its melody. He hadn't expected her to stay. He wasn't. Naive enough to believe in fairy tales, but knowing that didn't soften the sting of her absence. At night, lying in the dark, he couldn't escape her. The way her laughter had danced on the wind when she caught her first fish, the way her hand had nestled so naturally in his. He told himself it didn't matter, that she was a fleeting memory, a summer shadow destined to fade. But deep down, he knew it was a lie, a flimsy shield against the truth that she'd left a mark he couldn't erase. Then life dealt him a blow far crueler than longing. It began with a phone call. Jack was finishing his shift, the sun sinking low, when his younger sister Emma's voice crackled through the line, trembling with fear. "Jack, it's Mom." His stomach plummeted. "What happened?" "She collapsed," Emma whispered. "They're taking her to the hospital now." He didn't respond. Couldn't. He grabbed his keys and ran, the world blurring past him. By the time he reached the small hospital, his mother lay in a bed, her face pale as ash, her breath shallow and frail. The doctor's words struck like a hammer. "She has a heart condition," he explained, his tone grave. "It's been developing for some time, but she's been ignoring the symptoms." Jack's jaw clenched. That sounded like her, always putting others first, even at the cost of her own life. "She'll need ongoing treatment," the doctor continued. "Medication, checkups, possibly surgery down the line." Jack didn't ask about the cost. He already knew too much, far too much for a man like him to bear. So he did what he always did. He worked harder. He took on extra shifts at the dock, picked up handyman jobs around town, anything to scrape together the money piling up in hospital bills. Sleep became a stranger, exhaustion his constant companion. but it still wasn't enough. Then came the next blow. One afternoon, as he finished at the boat rental, his boss, Carl, called him into the office. "Jack," Carl sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I hate to do this, but we're making some changes around here." Jack tensed. What kind of changes? Carl hesitated. New management. They're bringing in their own staff. Jack's stomach sank, a cold dread pooling there. "You're firing me?" Carl's face twisted with regret. "It's not personal, kid. You're one of the best workers I've had, but it's out of my hands." Jack gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles whitening. "Listen," Carl added, lowering his voice. "This town's changing, more tourists, more development. They want polished staff, people who fit the new image." Jack scoffed, the bitterness sharp on his tongue. He knew what that meant. Not him, not the rough-edged local who'd never fit their glossy vision. Without a word, he walked out. The weeks that followed were a blur of desperation. He took any job he could find, fixing fences, repairing roofs, hauling furniture, anything to keep the wolves at bay. But the bills mounted, relentless and unforgiving. Then, one evening, he came home to find Emma at the kitchen table, her face ashen, an envelope trembling in her hands. "Jack," she whispered, sliding it toward him. He picked it up, the words searing into his vision. Final notice. Foreclosure warning. His heart pounded, a frantic drumbeat against his ribs. They were going to lose the house, the last tether to his mother's sacrifices, the fragile remnant of their family. Jack closed his eyes, his fists clenching until his nails bit into his palms. He'd always believed hard work could save them, that he could outrun any storm. But now, for the first time, he didn't know how to fight back. The late afternoon sun bathed the small, weathered house in a warm, golden glow, its peeling paint and creaking steps a testament to years of struggle. The garden his mother once tended with love had withered, choked by neglect and hardship. Jack sat on the porch, elbows on his knees, the crumpled foreclosure notice gripped in his hands. His chest felt like it was caving in, his mind racing through dwindling options, each one slipping through his fingers like sand. Then, the low rumble of an engine broke the silence. He looked up, frowning as a sleek black car rolled to a stop in front of the house, a machine too polished, too pristine for a place like this. The driver stepped out, opening the back door, and then she emerged. Olivia. Jack froze, his breath catching as she stood there, transformed yet achingly familiar. Gone were the carefree shorts and wind-tossed hair of their summer days. Now she wore a fitted blazer over a silk blouse, her posture straight, her presence radiating quiet power. But when her eyes met his, he saw her, the Olivia who'd laughed on his boat, who'd clung to him on the beach, who'd looked at him like he was her anchor in a storm. She took a deep breath, stepping closer. Jack. His name on her lips sent a jolt through him, sharp and alive. He cleared his throat, forcing his voice steady. Olivia. Relief flickered across her face, as if she'd feared he might not speak her name at all. He crossed his arms, nodding toward the car. "Did you get lost or something?" A faint smile tugged at her lips, but it faded as her gaze swept over the house, the sagging porch, the cracked windows. "I came to see you," she said. Jack exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Olivia, why?" "I know," she interrupted, her voice soft but resolute. "About your mom, about the house, about everything." His jaw tightened. "Who told you?" "I looked into it," she admitted. "After I left, I couldn't stop thinking about you, so I asked someone to find out how you were doing." Jack let out a dry, humorless laugh. "So what, you felt bad for me?" Her eyes flashed, a spark of defiance. "No, She exhaled sharply, grasping for words. "I came because I care." Jack swallowed hard, looking away, the weight of her confession pressing against his ribs. "Well, thanks," he said gruffly, "but I don't need a pity visit." "That's not what this is," she said, her tone firm, unshakable. He turned, back to her. "Then what is it?" She hesitated, then stepped closer, her presence a quiet force. "It's a chance." Jack frowned, confusion knitting his brow. A chance for what? Olivia straightened, reaching into her bag and pulling out a folder. To change your life. His eyes narrowed, wary. Olivia, I know you. She cut him off, her voice steady. You'd rather drown than accept money from me, so I won't offer that. Jack clenched his jaw but didn't argue. She handed him the folder. What I am offering is a job. He blinked, caught off guard. What? I'm working on a project in California, she explained, her words measured but alive with purpose. A foundation that builds homes for families in need. It's something I've wanted to do for a long time, and now I have the resources to make it happen. Jack flipped open the folder, scanning the documents, plans, contracts, a vision laid out in ink. I need people who know how to build, Olivia continued. People who work hard, who understand what it means to need something and fight for it. Jack looked up, his voice low. Why me? She held his gaze unflinching. Because you're the hardest working person I've ever met. Because I know you won't take a handout, but you'll take an opportunity. He swallowed, glancing. Back at the papers, it was real. A job, a lifeline, a way to save his family. He met her eyes again, searching for doubt, for hesitation, but found none. You came all this way just to offer me a job. She nodded, a quiet certainty in her stance. I told you. I couldn't stop thinking about you. Jack exhaled, slowly, staring at the folder in his hands. He'd spent so long believing his life was a fixed course, a relentless fight against a tide he couldn't turn. But here she was, Olivia Parker, standing before him with an outstretched hand, offering him a chance he'd never dared to dream of. He looked back at her, his heart pounding, and saw the girl who'd changed him, the girl who'd come back. For him, this time Jack knew he wouldn't let her slip away. The California sun blazed high, casting long shadows over the construction site where Jack worked, the air thick with the scent of fresh-cut wood and curing concrete, laced with the distant whisper of the ocean breeze rolling in from the west. He wiped the sweat from his brow, adjusting his grip on the hammer as he drove another nail into place, the rhythm of the work grounding him. Months had passed since he'd stepped into this new world, Los Angeles, with its towering skyscrapers, polished suits, and frenetic pace. At first it had felt like a dream, unreal and disorienting. But this was solid. The buzz of saws, the steady thud of hammers, the shared effort of men and women building homes for those who'd lost everything. It was hard, honest labor. And for the first time in years, Jack felt he was crafting something lasting, not just for others, but for himself. He'd started as an outsider, the rough-hewn stranger Olivia had brought into their midst. Some of the crew had eyed him skeptically, whispering that he wouldn't last, that he was just her latest charity case. But Jack silenced them with his hands. He arrived before dawn, left after dusk, learned fast, and took on the heaviest loads without a word. When a beam slipped, he caught it. When a plan faltered, he fixed it. When the team needed a steady voice, he stepped forward. And people noticed, none more so than William Parker, Olivia's father. At first, Mr. Parker had regarded Jack with cool suspicion, a fleeting summer dalliance his daughter had dragged home in a fit of rebellion. But as weeks turned to months, he saw the truth in Jack's resolve, the way he carried himself, the respect he earned, the quiet leadership he wore like a second skin. One evening, after Jack single-handedly managed an entire build site, William approached him, extending a hand. You've got potential, son, he said, his voice gruff but genuine. More than I gave you credit for. It wasn't a warm embrace, but it was a crack in the wall, a grudging nod of respect. And for Jack, that was enough. That night, the waves crashed gently against the Malibu Avenue Malibu shore, the moon scattering silver streaks across the sand. Jack and Olivia walked side by side, their footprints trailing behind them in the cool, yielding earth. You're quiet tonight, Olivia said, nudging him playfully, her voice light. Jack exhaled, gazing out at the water, its dark expanse stretching to the horizon. Just thinking. About what? He smirked, a flicker of warmth in his eyes. How I never thought I'd end up here. She laughed, the sound bright. And free. Well, I never thought I'd fall in love with the guy who saved my life. Jack stopped walking, the words hanging between them, heavy with truth. Olivia took a few steps before realizing he'd halted. She turned, a question forming on her lips, but then she saw him, Jack, dropping to one knee in the sand. Her breath caught, her heart stuttering as he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, delicate object. It gleamed under the moonlight. Not a diamond, not gold, but a seashell, tiny and perfect. One he'd plucked from the Outer Banks the day before he left Virginia. He'd shaped it, polished it into a simple band. A piece of home, a piece of them. Olivia Parker, he said, his voice quiet but steady, his blue eyes locked on hers. I don't have a mansion or a fancy last name. I don't have a private jet or a billion-dollar empire. But I have this. He held up the ring, its humble beauty a vow in itself. And I have you. Olivia's hands flew to her mouth, trembling as tears welled in her eyes. Jack swallowed, hard, his heart a wild drumbeat in his chest. I love you, he said, the words raw and true. I've loved you since that summer, since the first time you called me sailor and nearly fell off my boat. A watery laugh broke from her, a sound of joy and memory. I don't know where this life will take us, he admitted. But if I get to spend it with you, I know it'll be worth it. He took a breath, then asked the question that held his world in its balance. Will you marry me? A single tear slipped down her cheek as she nodded, her voice breaking. Yes. Relief flooded through him, a grin splitting his face as he slid the shell ring onto her finger, its fit as perfect as their promise. Before he could rise, Olivia threw herself into his arms, knocking them both into the sand. Her lips crashed against his, fierce and tender, and the crowd, however distant, faded away. The ocean roared behind them, the stars stretched endlessly. Above and in that moment, Jack knew he'd found his place, not just beside her, but within her forever. The waves lapped gently at the shore, their timeless murmur blending with the soft hum of laughter and music. The setting sun bathed the beach in a golden warmth, casting long shadows over the white chairs arranged in a tender semicircle on the sand. Fairy lights twinkled between wooden posts swaying in the ocean breeze, a delicate glow against the fading day. Jack stood barefoot, the sand cool beneath his toes, his hands clasped loosely before him. The salty wind tousled his dark hair, and he felt a quiet wonder. This moment, this life, so far beyond the horizon he'd once known. He'd never pictured himself here, not like this, in a tailored linen shirt, surrounded by friends and family, waiting for the woman who'd rewritten his fate. Then she appeared, Olivia, moving toward him with a grace that stole his breath. Her white dress flowed around her like the waves, soft and alive, her hair loose and catching the breeze. Her bare feet sank into the sand with each step, and she wore no diamonds, no pearls, just herself, simple and radiant. Jack's chest tightened, his world narrowing to her alone. The softness of her smile, the love in her eyes as she reached. Gim. The guests melted into the background, their presence a faint echo against the vow unfolding before them. The ceremony was intimate, a heartbeat of promises spoken in the fading light. Emma, Jack's sister, stood beside him as his best woman, her eyes bright with pride. Olivia's childhood friend held her bouquet, a quiet pillar of support. Even William Parker sat among the guests, his gaze steady, a man who'd once doubted Jack but now bore witness to their truth. When the officiant spoke, "You may kiss the bride," Jack didn't hesitate. He pulled Olivia into his arms, kissing her deeply, a seal on their forever as cheers erupted around them. She was his, and he was hers, bound by love, unbroken by time. The months that followed spun into a whirlwind of purpose. Jack stayed with Olivia's foundation, but his vision grew wings. With her beside him, he stretched the project beyond. California, bringing it home to Virginia, the land that had forged him. In the Outer Banks, he built homes for families like his own, shielding them from the storms he'd weathered. Olivia, too, shed the gilded shell of her past, the extravagant galas, the hollow luxury, the weight of her name. She found her soul in the quiet victories, painting walls, handing over keys to tear-streaked families, seeing hope reborn in their eyes. Together they traveled, worked, changed lives, one home, one heart at a time, yet always returned to the beach where it began. One evening, long after the world had hushed, Jack and Olivia sat on the sand, watching the sun slip below the horizon, its last light bleeding into the sea. She leaned her head against his shoulder, a contented sigh escaping her. "Do you ever think about that day?" she asked, her voice a soft thread. Jack glanced down, brushing a curl from her face. "Which one?" "The day you pulled me out of the ocean." He smirked, warmth flooding his chest. "You mean the day you nearly drowned because you thought you could take on a rip current?" She swatted his arm playfully. "I didn't." "No," he chuckled, pressing a kiss to her hair. "Yeah, I think about it all the time." Olivia smiled, her fingers tracing idle patterns in the sand. "It's funny," she mused. "I thought you were just some stranger saving my life that day. I didn't realize you'd be the one giving me a whole new one." Jack's heart swelled, her words a quiet echo of his own truth. He pulled her closer, resting his chin atop her head. "I think we saved each other," he murmured. She looked up, her eyes shimmering in the dusk. "Yeah," she whispered. "I think so too." And as they sat there, the waves singing their eternal lullaby, Jack knew they'd found something rare, something deeper than wealth, stronger than fate. They'd found love, and they'd found home. Their story wasn't just a romance. It was a testament to resilience, to kindness, to the quiet miracle of two souls from different worlds weaving a life on their own terms. Jack once thought struggle was his destiny. Olivia once felt trapped by her legacy. Together, they proved that happiness isn't tethered to where you begin. It's forged in who you become and who you choose to hold close.